live from Brussels. It's ZN Live. We are very excited today. We have a very special guest, Maria Linkova-Nijs, who's been very active on LinkedIn and on a couple of very interesting topics. Maria has extensive experience in communication. She's communication director for Cefic. She's been a journalist by training, and she's worked in different public affairs agencies. So we're very, very happy to have you here today. Now, some of the things that you've been talking about on LinkedIn, I think are very interesting. And you've been really looking, I think, quite deeply at AI and how people could use these tools to actually help draft public affairs and public policy documents. So can you tell us a bit about this? Is it working? Are you actually using it daily? Is this just an experiment?
Well, good afternoon, Phil, Leora, and good afternoon to all our listeners. Very nice to be here in the podcast, sharing some of the ideas that I have. So I feel that we're diving right into the most exciting topic of today's episode, the AI. So the impact of AI, and I think where do we start? It feels like now it's becoming a full-time job just to keep up with all the developments in this very rapidly evolving area. So probably by the time this episode ends, whatever I'm going to say about AI, may become obsolete. And indeed, I mean, to your question, Phil. So it's not just for experimentation. I think that it's not a gimmick. This is a real deal, and I think it has a lot of benefits to all comms professionals, to all policy communicators, lobbyists, public affairs professionals here in Brussels. So there are two benefits that I see. The first one is obviously faster content production times, because now you can deploy AI for pretty much anything from writing, image generation, video making, podcast editing, stakeholder mapping, stakeholder analysis, real-time transcription of meetings, you name it. Everything can be made faster and more efficient with the help of AI. So what took you one day yesterday will probably take just a couple of hours to do tomorrow. So enormous gains in efficiency. Then the next benefit is stimulating creativity and helping with fast ideation. So let's take ChatGPT. So the most recurring criticism, of course, is that this is not an accurate tool. It's not an encyclopedic reference. What it says is completely wrong. Yes, this is its biggest advantage. So by coming up with outlandish and strange ideas, it actually helps you think outside of the box and explore ideas that would have never occurred to you if, in the first place, if you were just Googling for the factual information. So if you really, whenever you write something or whenever you work on the arguments, for example, because you need speaking points ahead of your meeting with, a key decision maker. So if you if you put in a prompt like, give me 5 uncommon or rarely discussed ideas on how to do X. So this really works wonders. It gives you some interesting ideas to think about. And maybe all of them will be wrong, but at least it will spur your thinking in the direction that you wouldn't have probably gone in the first place. Or, for example, it's also very good at acting as let's say a person with different perspective, coming from a different background, a different political party. So you can, by typing in a prompt like act as a representative of political party X and come up with 5 arguments why this policy is flawed. So that immediately gives you a different perspective on things that you can incorporate in your daily writing or speaking. So this is definitely not a copy-paste tool or not a scientific reference tool, but this does help with fast ideation and with creativity. And there are, of course, legitimate concerns with AI, which, of course, need to be addressed by the governments and private actors. But I mean, don't just take my word for it. I think recently Bill Gates said that he compared AI with the invention of internet and mobile phones. So this is huge. So yeah, folks on the podcast, if you think that AI will steal your job, it will not. But I think comms professionals with the knowledge of AI definitely will.
So I want to check, practically, because you mentioned a lot of examples, and this is a discussion that's happening. If you look on LinkedIn and everywhere, everybody's kind of trying to understand how it's being used. So, do you use this every day, several times a day? And is this something that Cefic as a whole is starting to incorporate strategically, or is it still a few people experimenting and trying to find out how to use it?
Yeah, well, of course, it's still in the experimentation phase, and I don't think there is we need to think of any corporate ways to use this. I've been running a few workshops also within our organization, because indeed we have 170 people. We're the largest trade association in Brussels. So I've been running a few workshops to really to tell my colleagues how they can use this in their daily work, because there are a lot of misconceptions still about ChatGPT, about AI, that it's we've just discussed it, that this should be a like a Google. No, this is not Google. This is not a fact-checking tool. This is completely different. So I think that there's a lot of that we can still learn and learn about this tool, and also help others as communicators. I think our let's say purpose and our goal and our mission is to help all our colleagues, policy issue experts, to become better policy communicators. But in my daily life, I use it for a lot of things. As I said, not as as a copy-paste tool, not to write and then copy-paste, but mainly, as I said, to challenge ideas, to come up with new ideas. For example, I ask it, if I write about something, give me 4 stories of how writing this, and then you insert your fragment, might fail. And what would be the arguments against what you're saying? Or, for example, you have a text and you want to check whether the key message that you want this text to convey, that is really visible. So you asked also ChatGPT, okay, summarize the key message of this text in 1 sentence. And by looking at what it gives you back, you then realize, okay, this is what can be inferred from the text. Or maybe it's not. Then it means that you have to work harder, then your key message is not really visible in your writing. Or also, what is, I think, very useful for political campaigning, and I know that probably there are listeners that work in political organizations, so it also very good at writing for various cognitive biases. So, for example, you can ask it to study the values model Settlers, Prospectors, and Pioneers. This is a very well-known model that is used in political campaigning to divide all population in 3 groups based on their values. And so you say, okay, ChatGPT, study this model and then act as a leader of a political party and write a message to your electorate outlining why policy X is essential. And then write 3 versions of the letter with different messages depending on this particular audience that you're addressing. And it comes up with really good results. So again, I can only encourage everybody on who listens to this podcast, really go deeper than just asking it to come up with 5 creative ideas for a tagline for your campaign, but explore more sophisticated prompts to ensure that you really make the most of this tool.
Yeah, no, very, very insightful, and I think very practical recommendations, because a lot of the discussions we're having right now are what practical applications you have of AI, and in particular ChatGPT or GPT-4. So we have a comment from Nuno actually saying, very insightful discussion on AI. Maria, I'd like to ask if you think that a mass use of AI in the future will create a negative impact on having different communication approaches and strategies. So I'll go straight to Nuno's question, Maria.
It's a good question. And as I said, this is such a rapidly advancing field that it's so new. Everybody, is learning by doing, and indeed there are some concerns and ethical concerns, legal concerns about the use of those tools that need to be addressed. But at the end of the day, I think we just have to be very, very sober about this. This is just a tool. It can be used for both good and bad purposes. Talking about fake news, will people use it to generate and disseminate fake news? Absolutely, yes. Would they have done it anyhow, even if ChatGPT did not exist? Also, yes. So I think we need to address the fears and uncertainties. But my personal view is that there is much more great potential in this tool, and that which also goes beyond, AI in general, which goes beyond our very narrow communications field here, because the promises of AI in fundamental research, in healthcare, in other areas is really tremendous. So I think we have to keep the bigger perspective in mind. And as I said, I don't think we need to fear about our jobs. It's now just a unique opportunity to incorporate new tools in our arsenal so that we could, do our job faster or more efficiently.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, in practice, there are a lot of uses that we can do today, especially on editing, ideation, summarization, and just having some interesting points of view generated through the AI. But there's a whole kind of generation of new services and tools that are about to happen, and I think that those are going to be incredibly transformative. You mentioned something about your colleagues and their communication efforts, and I want to move to your communication focus. You've been very active on LinkedIn and on social media, communicating about the areas that you're particularly interested in. And I think for a lot of communicators, and even people who are policy experts, there's always a fear of sharing information on social media. Maybe they don't know what they can and cannot do. You posted about that. Actually, you posted a text in a carousel, I think, on the topic. So what would you say to people who are a little cautious and don't say, okay, maybe your communication director is okay, but what should I do as a communicator on social media? Should I go for it? Do I have to exercise caution? What is your general advice to those people?
Yes, that's indeed a very good question, and I think there is one answer to this. I think, first of all, you need to obviously consult your organization's guidelines. So a lot of brands, a lot of organizations have social media guidelines that really, set the tone of voice or the range of topics that are okay to talk about. And then, of course, consult your colleagues if you're not sure. But I think that's I don't think people should be afraid to go online and be passionate about what they care, because this is, I think, this is a great asset for any organization, because the employees, our colleagues, the staff, they are the best ambassadors and the best advocates that we can think about as leaders, because these are the people that are, well, I suppose most of the time really care about the cause of the association. And this is why I think also internal communication is extremely important in any organization, because if you fail to equip your staff, so your best potential advocates, with a very clear understanding of what you're doing, why you're doing, and what is the, let's say, the elevator pitch, of your organization, then you're also missing on a very big opportunity to influence, because influence does not just happen in formal meetings, between a secretary general or CEO and, commissioners. Influence happens in informal networking interactions and, plus looks at a playground in a Brussels park. So really equipping your people with the right understanding, the right messages on each key area that your organization works for. This is, I think, it's a great investment into the future. And this is also, I think, important to prevent any negative cases of employee activism and whistleblowing, which is, of course, also could be a serious issue. But coming back to the social media, this is indeed a more, let's say, I would say, gray area, because, of course, some people may feel that they do not always agree with the organization's line to take, and they feel that they have the right to speak about this on their private social media channels. And to be honest, I don't have the right clear-cut answer to this conundrum. And if some of our listeners, have a solution, please tell me about that. I'd like to hear. But maybe the focus should shift also from just creating some guidelines and enforcing them to, again, empowering colleagues to become more vocal on social media. So to empowering them to create content, to telling them more about, okay, what are the ways that you can become more visible and grow your presence and your own thought leadership on social media. Because indeed, a lot of people within organizations, they want to do that, but they just don't know how to get started. And this is also where I think that us corporate communicators, again, we have a big role to play to help our colleagues to become thought leaders, if they wish to. Of course, I think it always has to be kind of on a voluntary basis. You cannot become a thought leader, by orders from somebody. But for those who really want and they just don't know how to get started, there is a lot that we can do to help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think how you started with the fear that they might say something that is in contradiction is actually very unlikely. Once you see employees or members of an organization become more vocal, it's almost always fully in line with what the organization says. And it's more the last thing you said, that they're a little bit worried about, how do I start? When do I write? Where do I find the time to write? What do I even write about? And so to give them a little bit of training, which is what we do quite frequently, really helps. And then you have a whole army of professionals sharing your messages and speaking out on your behalf. On a similar note, I have a question, because we often still see that several members or parts of organizations still see communications as a nice to have, as an afterthought, as the first thing that gets caught in budgets, for example. I was caught by a post you had on LinkedIn about this, and where you said this was even the key reason that the Silicon Valley Bank went down. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about this.
Yeah, yes, indeed. This is an example maybe from, completely different area in a different part of the world. It happened obviously in the Silicon Valley, but I think this is really important for all of us communicators to be aware of this. So we all know that, the Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, I think it was a few months ago. And basically the reason for that was, of course, next to some financial issues, the fact how they portrayed this in their press release. So there was the issue is a very complex, technical, absolutely incomprehensible press release. And the key point that the bank lost some money, it was buried somewhere in the middle, which was, of course, one of the key messages there. And that obviously prompted, bank runs. So people, the depositors got really scared, and a lot of people just started withdrawing money from the bank. And that, of course, led to its collapse. And now I think it's also established, let's say, facts of people who analyze this situation. It's not just me saying that. Should they approach this from a different angle and really took the time to explain to their stakeholders, to their shareholders, the depositors, what's happening with the bank, to just craft a more compelling story, what they're doing and why they're doing what they're doing, to reassure people that the financial situation is nothing to worry about, they could have avoided this situation. So this is, as I said, I think probably maybe the first really clear-cut example, how a press release can ruin the bank. And this is why I'm telling anyone who listens to us who still struggles to prove the value of good comms, good storytelling in their organization, please print out this case study, show it to your boss as a proof that this is not just something nice to have. This is really comms is and should be part of let's say, the strategic discussion within any organization, especially if you plan to publish something important and big. You can't just loop in comms at the very last stage and then expect any miracles.
Yeah, and I think there was another part of this kind of extraordinary story, which was that the social media space just kind of caught fire, and apparently a lot of people are saying that triggered the run on the bank, which people were just saying,
Yep.
hey, I'm removing my money, and this spread like wildfire. So understanding communication and understanding how it spreads on social media is really critical. Now, I want to ask you, with all those changes, with AI, with social media, with those new trends, when you're meeting young communicators who start in their profession, what is your advice to them? What do you think they need to look out for to be successful in their career today?
So there are two things. The first, of course, learn as much as you can and do it by reading, and not just reading social media and articles, but reading the actual books. And try to also read outside of your domain. I think this is also a proven way to really improve your problem solving and creative skills. Because by reading things outside of your domain, your brain starts creating those links between seemingly unrelated ideas. And this is how creative ideas emerge. So yeah, just read a lot. Everything has already been invented. Do not reinvent the wheel. And the second one is maybe choose. So when you choose a new job, choose it based on the people that you're going to work with. Again, the focus here is how to learn from the best. So the organization may not have the sexiest title, but it may have a leader or a team that is really good at what it does. And being around those people will definitely be worth your time.
So learning and reading, that's the perfect cue for our recommendations. Indeed. So tell us, what is your recommendation this week for our listeners and viewers?
Yeah, so we've talked about creativity a lot in this podcast, and the book that I'm going to recommend, again, should help everybody improve their creative and problem-solving skills. It's called Idea Flow, the only business metrics that matters. I've read it recently, and it really helped me a lot, and now I'm recommending it to all my friends and colleagues. So this book will give you a very simple framework on how to become more creative and how to start generating ideas for yourself, but also how to help your teams start generating good ideas, and also experiment with those ideas, test those ideas, and select those that will work in practice. And it literally just takes 10 minutes a day to implement some of the tips and tricks from that book, but it will have a really tremendous effect on anyone's problem-solving skills. So I can only recommend, and if somebody on my recommendation buys this book, does all the exercises, but still feels that does nothing to his problem-solving skills, please reach out to me and I'll reimburse the cost of the book, I promise.
I actually, when I saw your recommendation, I ordered the book. It just came in yesterday. So I'm very excited about reading it. It looks fascinating. Leora, what are your recommendations for this week?
I have two recommendations related to the AI. I have to be honest that I spent 3.5 hours this week listening to the full debate on Dutch politics this week. So that's what I've immersed myself into this week. I'm very much into Dutch politics at the moment, and Israeli politics, which are both a tremendous mess. But I wanted to recommend things around AI. If you haven't watched, and it's come out a while back, the interview with Sam Altman by Lex Friedman, then you have to absolutely listen to it, watch it. He's of course the CEO of OpenAI, the creator of ChatGPT, DALL-E, and Codex, and that is just such a fascinating interview because he says that AI is it's just like the very early computers. It's so early on, and so just to think about it, how transformative it's already to us right now. But he says, no, this is just at the very, very beginning. And so can you just imagine where we'll be in 5, 10, 15 years from now? I mean, it's mind-boggling. And he also says that he can't emphasize enough how much the collective intelligence and creativity of the world will beat OpenAI. So he put it out in a way that we can make changes, because so it's all very much open for debate. So it's really fascinating. It's quite long, but you will not be bored for 1 second. I listened to it with my 14-year-old son, and we were just like listening with our mouths wide open. The second thing I'd like to recommend is a debate on AI with Phil in it and Kai Troll, who we like very much, who was moderating the discussion, organized by the Association World. And I definitely recommend you give it a listen or watch, because it was also on video, and maybe Phil can share a little bit more about what happened in that debate.
Yeah, it was very interesting. We had over 100 people actually joining, and very, very curious about how to apply AI. That's why, Maria, I think your insights are so useful. I think it might be really great to have some of your insights for this audience, because people are very, very interested in better understanding how they can begin their journey in trying these tools. So I already shared my thoughts on that on a little video on this. And there was a question, by the way, Maria, I tagged you on this, on how to use this for public affairs. So it'd be great to have your insights there. Leora, I agree, by the way, that this interview with Sam Altman is fascinating. There's a moment when he actually says, they're discussing consciousness, and they say, maybe you're just a GTP4 simulation at a later model. And I thought that's when things get really weird. Are we living in an AI simulation? Are we?
It's so Plato-esque. It's so Plato, like the whole thing. I love it.
Yeah, so I think that was really fascinating. And I want to end my recommendation with a book from Edward de Bono. This is actually a very old book. De Bono passed away this year. He invented lateral thinking, thinking hats. I'm a big fan of very simple creativity. Now, this book is a little different. He tries to codify a number of concepts that he thinks are missing with numbers. And I don't think he's been that successful, but the idea of trying to identify missing words that we don't have to describe certain situations, because words are tools, and those tools can help you to make your shape your perception, see new things, understand new things. And I think that's a very powerful concept. That was my thinking behind hyperthinking, which is trying to create a new word to see things differently, understand the world. So that would be my recommendation. So that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much, Maria, for your insights and for sharing on LinkedIn. It's great to follow your thinking process, and you're really sharing some very useful experiments with your audience and with the wider Brussels and EU bubble. So it's very, very nice to hear from you. Looking forward to continuing this discussion online and to catch up with you later on. Have a great holiday. Those of you going on holiday, happy Easter. And we will see you next Friday. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Maria.
Everybody. Thanks, Phil, Leora.